Hello and welcome back to another video feature of the Immersive Worlds Handbook. Today I'm using this opportunity in this existential feature to offer the second of my video features on representing the unrepresentable. And I am at the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin. And if you had a chance to watch my other video feature, you will no doubt see some similarities between the abstraction and design of this particular memorial focused on Jews and the Holocaust with my previous focus on the Jewish Museum Berlin designed by Daniel Libeskind. There have been a number of controversies related to this memorialization that I'll mention in a bit, and one of the ones that has come up frequently is that the memorial is perhaps too abstract and too non-symbolic. Critics have mentioned the fact that we're paying homage to murdered Jews, but we're never exactly stating who did the murdering. And in other cases, there are concerns about the fact that one doesn't gain enough information from this memorial, perhaps because of its abstract and non-symbolic nature. And in looking at some of these parallels between these two different sites in Berlin, in addition to noticing some similarity in terms of the layout and the abstraction, I think both sites remind us of the fact that as we try to understand how to represent the unrepresentable, in many cases we struggle with even conceptualizing how to achieve this. I'm reminded somewhat of the philosopher Theodor Adorno and his quote about there being no possibility of writing poetry after the Holocaust. To do so, he offered us, it would be utterly barbaric. And I think in the case of this memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, we see the clear challenge of trying to represent something that eludes our representation. And I think in another way we see an additional parallel back to Libeskind's work, in this case here with Peter Eisenman. And in 2012 there was an interesting criticism written in the New Yorker about the inadequacy of Berlin's memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. And I believe, like some of the criticism of Daniel Libeskind's Jewish Museum Berlin, one of the issues that was raised is that the artifact, the memorialization here, is too abstract. There isn't any symbolism to understand. And some have mentioned that you could walk through the space and feel the metaphor of, or symbolism of a cemetery, but even that, it seems to me, could be a far-off interpretation. I think in the case of the abstraction here, we see this similar concern that we did with Libeskind's work, and namely the concern that some people have that you should use maybe a more representational approach to memorializing something horrific as the Holocaust. And in just a second here, you'll see video of my walkthrough of the memorial. And as you can probably tell as we walk through here, there are some similar plays with depth of field, approaches using elevation. It may be hard to tell in the video, but as I'm walking through the columns here, you're going to notice some changes in elevation. And there are points, what is really curious about this memorial as compared to the Garden of Exile of Libeskind is there are points here where you're standing fully above the columns, and then at certain points later you're actually below them. So it also gives you that sense of being enveloped within this space, and I think in this abstracted sense it does make an existential point about this very dark and disturbing period in human history. And as we close this, the second of two features on the representation of the unrepresentable, I hope we'll use this opportunity in this overview of two important sites, one a museum, one a memorial, both in Berlin, that we'll use this opportunity to think about the challenges we face in museum spaces and also in memorial spaces in dealing with topics which have such a dark and existential and troubling focus. And clearly, in themed and immersive spaces, this issue isn't often covered, that issue being the fact that we're dealing with something that is so dark and disturbing. And in the case of these spaces, we see that an entirely different range of politics, social issues, existential, philosophical, and theological topics are necessarily connected to these types of spaces.